I was sitting at my table at 6:24 p.m. on a Saturday when the door opened. He was still in his graduation suit. He had been gone for exactly 6 hours. He came back, not to collect something he forgot, not for any reason that made sense on paper. He came back because, and this is the thing I will spend the rest of my life understanding, some habits are harder to change than plans. Stay with me, because this moment is the end of the story, and I need you to understand everything that came before it. All 87 days of it. Starting with the first morning. Starting with one look in a corridor. Starting with the specific sensation of something rearranging inside you without asking permission. Before you even knew his name. His name was Ryo Matsuda. Kota learned this 40 minutes later when Professor Arai stood at the front of the first-year orientation room and read out the senior mentor assignments. 1 fourth year to every 2 first years, the department's tradition of pairing established students with new ones, a system that had existed since before either of them was born. Nishimura Kota, Professor Arai said, "Your senior mentor is Matsuda Ryo." Kota looked up from his notebook. Ryo was already looking at him from across the room. Not with surprise, not with the particular wariness of someone who has just registered a complication, but with the expression of someone confirming information they already had. Calm, precise, entirely controlled. He gave Kota a single nod. Kota gave him one back. Neither of them said anything. The room continued around them. Other pairings announced, other introductions beginning, and Kota sat in his chair and thought, very clearly and with the specific helplessness of someone who can see exactly where a road goes and is walking down it anyway. Of all the seniors in this department, of all the possible people, after orientation, Ryo found him in the corridor, which should not have felt significant, which was simply the senior mentor doing what senior mentors do, which was entirely professional and entirely appropriate. Nishimura-kun, Ryo said, "I'm Matsuda. I'll be your mentor for the semester." His voice was precise. The word arrived in Kota's mind before anything else. Not cold, not warm. Precise. Every word placed exactly where it needed to be. "I know," Kota said. "Professor Arai just." "I know what Professor Arai just said," Ryo said. "I'm telling you directly, so we're clear about the arrangement." "The arrangement," Kota repeated. "I meet with my ments every Tuesday and Thursday. 6 p.m., studio room 3B. I review your project work, answer questions about the department, and provide guidance on your coursework. I don't socialize with first years, and I don't make exceptions to my schedule." A pause, brief, precise. "Any questions?" Kota looked at him, at the dark hair pushed back from his face, at the quiet eyes that were measuring him with the specific efficiency of someone who processes information and moves on, at the jaw that was set with the composure of someone who has spent 4 years being exactly this controlled. "Just one," Kota said. "Go ahead. Do you always introduce yourself like you're reading from a document?" Something happened in Ryo's expression, so brief and so quickly managed that if Kota had blinked he would have missed it. Not offense. Not amusement. Something that was the suppressed version of both. "Tuesday, 6 p.m., room 3B, Ryo said. "Don't be late." He walked away. Kota stood in the corridor and felt, with absolute clarity, with zero preparation, with the complete certainty of someone who has just understood something they cannot ununderstand, that the next semester was going to be the most complicated thing that had ever happened to him. Tuesday came. Kota arrived at studio room 3B at 5:58 p.m., 2 minutes early, which he told himself was because he respected the schedule and not because he had been aware of the time for most of the afternoon. Ryo was already there. Of course he was. The studio room was small, 2 drafting tables, overhead fluorescent light, a window showing the Sakura University courtyard where the cherry blossom trees were beginning their October retreat, leaves turning, the specific amber pink of a Japanese university autumn. Ryo had his own work spread across one table, 4th-year thesis project. Kota could see from the scale and complexity of it, and had set up the other table for Kota's review. "Sit down," Ryo said without looking up. Kota sat. He put his portfolio on the table, the work from the first week, preliminary sketches, the first assignment brief responses, the beginning of what his aesthetic might become if he could figure out what his aesthetic was. Ryo came to his table, looked at the work, did not say anything for a long time. Kota sat in the silence and tried not to watch him the way he was watching him. Tried not to notice the specific way Ryo's eyes moved across a drawing. Methodical, but not mechanical, the way someone reads something they actually care about. Tried not to notice that Ryo was not yet 23 and had the particular authority of someone who has earned rather than assumed every centimeter of it. This one, Ryo said finally, pointing to a sketch. What about it? The structural logic is wrong. You've prioritized the aesthetic resolution at the expense of the load-bearing reality. It would fall. It's a preliminary sketch, Kota said. It's not supposed to be structurally resolved yet. Everything you put on paper is supposed to be honest, Ryo said. Even a preliminary sketch. If the structure is wrong, you know it's wrong. Don't pretend you don't know. Kota looked at the sketch. At the place where, yes, if he was being honest with himself, he had made the line do what he wanted aesthetically rather than what the physics required. Fine, he said. Fine what? Fine, you're right. Ryo looked at him. The same brief measuring look as the corridor, the same sense of someone receiving unexpected information. Most first years argue longer than that, he said. I'm not most first years, Kota said. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds and contained something neither of them acknowledged. Fix the structural logic by Thursday, Ryo said. Asterisk everything else is, asterisk a pause. Everything else is interesting. He went back to his own table. Kota stared at his sketch and thought. Interesting. And thought. He said interesting. And spent the rest of the session trying very hard not to smile about it, which was, as efforts go, not particularly successful. The sessions became the fixed point of Kota's week. Tuesday and Thursday, 6 p.m., room 3B. 45 minutes during which Ryo reviewed his work with the same precise attention. He gave everything, said what he thought without softening it, and occasionally, rarely, specifically, said something that was not a correction. These were the moments Kota waited for without admitting he was waiting for them. This corner, Ryo said in the 3rd week, pointing at a section of a facade study. This is the most honest thing you've done. It's also the messiest, Kota said. Yes, Ryo said. That's why it's honest. Kota looked at him across the table. You think mess is honest? I think control can be a way of lying, Ryo said. He said it without looking up from the drawing, in the tone of someone stating a fact rather than confessing something. When you know exactly what you're doing with every line, sometimes you're just preventing yourself from doing something better. A silence. Is that something you know from experience? Kota asked. Ryo looked up. The look lasted a beat too long. The fraction of a second where someone who is very good at being measured is not quite measuring fast enough. Fix the proportions on the east elevation, Ryo said. By Thursday, he went back to his work. Kota went back to his. Outside the studio window, the Sakura University courtyard was dark and lit by campus lamps. The cherry blossom trees bare now in November, and Senna, Ryo's 3rd-year friend who occasionally came to collect Ryo for dinner and had been watching this for 3 weeks, knocked on the studio door at 6:47 and said, Ryo, dinner. Now. In a minute, Ryo said. You said that 12 minutes ago. Kota looked at Ryo. Ryo was looking at Kota's drawing. He had been looking at it for 12 minutes without saying anything, which was not how these sessions usually went, which meant something had been happening for 12 minutes that neither of them was going to name. Go, Kota said. I can finish the review myself. You can't review your own work objectively, Ryo said. Then I'll be subjective. It'll be good for me. Something happened at the corner of Ryo's mouth. Not a smile. The suppressed architecture of one. Thursday, he said. 6 p.m. I know, Kota said. I'll be there. He was always there. He had not once been late. He did not tell Ryo this was because 6 p.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays had become the thing he organized the rest of his time around. The way you organize everything around the fixed point. He just showed up. 2 minutes early. Every time. This is the part where I need you to understand something about the next 30 days. Ryo had 87 days when the story started. By the time of the east elevation correction, he had 61. Neither of them was counting out loud. Both of them were counting. He found Kota in the architecture library at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. This was not a scheduled session. There was no reason for Ryo to be in the library at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. He had his own studio access, his own workspace. His thesis deadline was 6 weeks away, and he was ahead of it because he was always ahead of everything. He walked in because the library was on his way back from the student council office. He saw Kota immediately. dark hair bent over a spread of reference books, sketches covering the table around him. The specific posture of someone who has been in the same position for 3 hours and has stopped noticing. He should have walked past. He sat down across from him instead. Kota looked up. Saw Ryo. Something moved through his expression, surprise first, then something warmer, then the management of the warmer thing into something that looked more like casual. Matsuda-san, this isn't Tuesday or Thursday. I'm aware of the days of the week, Ryo said. Just checking. What are you working on? Kota turned the sketch he was working on toward Ryo across the table. It was a residential concept, small urban dwelling, Tokyo street context, the kind of human-scale project that first years were given because it was meant to be manageable. Kota's version was not manageable. It was doing 3 things at once that were not supposed to be possible at the same time, and somehow, looking at it, Ryo could see that they were working. He looked at it for a long time. You're doing something here that you shouldn't be able to do yet, he said. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet, Ryo said honestly. Give me a minute. He looked at it for another minute. It's good, he said. It's very good. Don't let anyone tell you to simplify it. Kota was quiet for a moment. That's the first time you've said something like that, he said. I say things like that when they're true. You've corrected me every session for 6 weeks. Because you needed correcting every session for 6 weeks, Ryo said. This doesn't need correcting. The library was very quiet at 11 p.m. The kind of quiet that belongs specifically to libraries at that hour. The few remaining students, the overhead lights on the occupied tables, the sense of the rest of the university already asleep. Why are you really here? Kota asked. Ryo looked at him. I told you. I was passing. The library is not on the way from the student council office to anywhere. I know the building layout. So do I, Kota said. I checked. A silence. Why did you check the building layout? Ryo asked. Why did you come to the library? Kota said. Neither of them answered. The library did what libraries do at 11 p.m., stayed quiet, stayed lit, held space for things that were not being said by people who were not ready to say them. Ryo stayed for 40 minutes. He told himself it was because the sketch was genuinely interesting and he wanted to see what Kota did with it. He left his own notebook on the table across from Kota's sketches and did not open it once. He heard it on a Thursday, not in room 3B, before the session, in the corridor outside, Ryo's voice through the partially open door, talking to Senna who had stopped by to deliver something from the department office. You're coming to the graduation dinner planning meeting tonight, Senna said. Yes. You've been distracted lately. I haven't. You left your thesis notebook in the library last Wednesday. You never leave things places. A pause. I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't fine. I said you were distracted. Senna's voice, warm and slightly tired. The voice of someone who has been watching something for too long. Is it the mentee? Another pause. Longer. I can't afford distractions before graduation, Ryo said. Asterisk I have 6 weeks. After I leave I won't. Asterisk he stopped. It doesn't matter. I need to finish cleanly. Finish cleanly, Senna repeated. No loose ends. Kota stood outside the door and heard this and understood, with the specific precision of someone who has been hoping for something and has just been given clear information that the hoping was wrong, that he was the distraction, that he was the loose end, that Ryo had already decided how this ended. He waited until he heard Senna leave. Then he knocked on the door and walked in and sat at his table and put his portfolio on the surface and opened it, and did not say anything about what he had just heard. Ryo looked at him. You're early, he said. Am I? Kota said. The session was different. Not dramatically. Kota answered questions, responded to corrections, did everything the session required. But something was pulled back. The specific ease that had built over 6 weeks, the way Kota occupied the room, the way the silences between them had started feeling like something rather than nothing, was absent. Ryo noticed within the first 10 minutes. He did not say anything for 20 more. Then, what's wrong? Nothing, Kota said. That's not true. It is true. You're doing your work correctly and saying the minimum required and leaving space between every response that wasn't there last Tuesday. Ryo said this with the calm precision of someone who has been paying very close attention without admitting it. Something changed between last Tuesday and today. Kota looked at him. You noticed that, he said. Yes. You notice a lot. Yes, Ryo said again. What changed? A silence. Nothing I'm going to tell you about, Kota said. Can we finish the review? They finished the review. Ryo walked home that night and thought about the specific quality of the pulled-back silence, and what he had said to Senna in the corridor, and whether those two things were connected, and what it would mean if they were. He thought about it for the entire 40-minute walk home. He did not sleep well. For days of Kota being professionally correct and nothing else. Tuesday session. Thursday session. Kota arriving at 5:58, leaving at 6:45, saying everything that needed to be said and nothing that didn't. Ryo found this. Intolerable was the word that arrived before he could choose something more appropriate. He found it intolerable in the specific way of someone who has become accustomed to a particular quality of a person's presence and is now experiencing its deliberate withdrawal. On the second Thursday, he said, at 6:43, before Kota could begin packing up. What did you hear? Kota went still. What? In the corridor. Before the session 2 weeks ago. What did you hear? A long silence. You knew I was there, Kota said. I suspected. I confirmed it just now. Kota looked at him with an expression that was complicated. The management of several things at once. You said you couldn't afford distractions before graduation, he said. That you needed to finish cleanly. No loose ends. Yes, Ryo said. Am I a loose end? The question sat in the room between them. Ryo looked at Kota, at the dark hair falling across his forehead, at the eyes that showed everything before he decided to show it, at the 19-year-old first-year student who had walked through the department door 11 weeks ago and made controlled feel like the wrong strategy and had apparently been reorganizing something in Ryo's chest since 8:47 on the first morning without asking permission. I said I couldn't afford distractions, Ryo said carefully. I didn't say you weren't one. Kota stared at him. That doesn't. I know, Ryo said. I know it doesn't resolve anything. Then why say it? Asterisk, because you've been professionally correct for 2 weeks, and I find it. Asterisk, he stopped. Chose a different word. I find it less useful than the alternative. The alternative being, whatever this has been, Ryo said. For 11 weeks. The studio room was very still. You have, Kota said slowly, a very specific way of almost saying something. I know, Ryo said. Is that going to change? A pause. I don't know, Ryo said. And this honesty, this specific crack in the precision, was the most Ryo had ever given him. I have 43 days. I know how many days you have, Kota said quietly. You're counting, aren't you? The longest silence of the 11 weeks. Yes, Ryo said. The number became something they both carried openly now. Not discussed. Neither of them was ready to discuss it the way it deserved to be discussed, but present. In the way Kota sometimes looked at Ryo across the studio, and Ryo looked back, and both of them let the looking happen without managing it away. In the way Ryo had started arriving at the library on Wednesdays, still not a scheduled session, still something neither of them named, and staying until Kota finished what he was working on. In the way things that had been not said for 11 weeks were beginning to press against the surface of every interaction, too full now to stay completely contained. 38 days. 35. 30. Senna said, on a Tuesday evening, finding Ryo in the studio after Kota had left. You know this is going to cost you something either way. I know, Ryo said. Doing it costs you the clean finish. Not doing it costs you, Senna paused. Well, you know what not doing it costs you. Yes. So I have 28 days to figure out which cost I can actually live with. That's very rational for a situation that is obviously not rational. Everything is rational if you approach it correctly. Ryo, Senna said. You left your thesis notebook in the library. Again. It was on his table. Ryo said nothing. It was on his table, Senna repeated. Not yours. His. A long silence. I'll get it tomorrow, Ryo said. You left it there on purpose. That's not. You left it there on purpose, Senna said again, not unkindly, because leaving it there meant you had a reason to go back. And having a reason to go back meant you didn't have to decide whether you needed a reason. Ryo looked at the drafting table, Kota's table, where 6 weeks of Kota's increasingly extraordinary work had been laid out and reviewed and occasionally, rarely, called interesting or honest or very good. I have 28 days, he said again. You have 28 days, Senna agreed. What are you going to do with them? 20 days. Professor Arai announced the end-of-semester review project, a collaborative brief, senior and first-year mentor pairs working together on a single design response. 1 week. Presented together. Kota and Ryo looked at each other across the studio when Professor Arai said this. Neither of them said anything. They started work that evening. It was different from the sessions, not mentor and mentee, not authority and subject, but two people working on the same problem from different angles with the specific complementary tension of two approaches that should not work together and do. Ryo's precision and Kota's instinct. Ryo's structure and Kota's feeling. Ryo knowing exactly why every line was where it was, and Kota knowing exactly what every line was for. They worked until midnight every night for a week. They argued, specifically, productively, about the things that mattered, in the way that people argue when they both care enough about the outcome to be honest about the disagreement. Ryo saying this doesn't work structurally, and Kota saying then make it work structurally, without killing what it's doing spatially, and Ryo being silent for 12 minutes, and then making it work structurally, without killing what it was doing spatially, and not saying anything about having done it, just continuing. On the fifth night, 16 days before Ryo's graduation, the project nearly complete on the drafting table between them, Kota said, without looking up from what he was drawing. What happens after you leave? I take the position at Aoyama Architecture Studio, Ryo said. I've had it confirmed for 6 months. That's not what I asked. A silence. I know, Ryo said. So what happens? Ryo looked at the project on the table. At 6 weeks of Kota's work visible in the left half of the design, the instinctive free lines that Ryo had learned, over 6 weeks, to read the way he read a language he had not been taught but recognized. At his own work in the right half, precise and structural, and, looking at it now, beside Kota's work, slightly less alive than it had been before he understood what alive could look like. I don't know, Ryo said. That's the second time you've said you don't know, Kota said. In 11 weeks. You said it once about the sketch and once about the cost. I'm aware. You don't say it often. No, Ryo said. I don't. What does it mean when you say it? Ryo looked at him. It means, he said slowly, that I'm in a situation where my usual approach isn't giving me a clear answer. And what's your usual approach? Calculate the variables. Determine the optimal outcome. Execute. And what's the variable you can't calculate? The studio was very quiet at midnight. The campus outside entirely dark and still. You, Ryo said. You're the variable I can't calculate. 14 days became 7. 7 became 3. 3 became the night before the graduation ceremony. Ryo's last night as a Sakura University student. The last night the third-floor corridor and studio room 3B and the architecture library at 11 p.m. belonged to him in any formal sense. He found Kota in the library. Of course he did. Kota was at the same table as the first night Ryo had walked in. Reference books, sketches, the specific posture of someone who has been working for hours. He looked up when Ryo sat down. Did not look surprised. You're supposed to be at the graduation dinner, Kota said. It ended an hour ago. And you came here. I came here, Ryo said. They looked at each other across the table. 86 days had passed since the first morning in the corridor. The course of them visible in the specific ease with which they now occupied the same space. The distance that had characterized every early session replaced with something that had no professional name, but was entirely legible. I've been thinking, Ryo said, about what I said. About variables. I remember. I said I couldn't calculate you. You did. I've been trying, Ryo said. For 3 weeks. I keep running the calculation and getting the same result. What result? That there is no version of leaving that doesn't cost me something I didn't know I had until 11 weeks ago. Kota was very still. And, he said, and I think, Ryo stopped. I think I have been so careful for so long that I forgot careful was a choice and not a requirement. He looked at Kota, directly, fully, with the complete attention he had given only to things that mattered. I think you are the first thing in 4 years that has made me want to make a different choice. The library at midnight. The campus outside dark and quiet. The specific weight of a last night and a first thing simultaneously. You're leaving tomorrow, Kota said. Yes. Aoyama Architecture Studio. Yes. That's 20 minutes from Sakura University by train. A pause. Yes, Ryo said. It is. I looked it up, Kota said. When? 3 weeks ago, Kota said. When I understood that finishing cleanly might not be the only option. Ryo looked at him for a long moment. You looked up the commute time, he said. I looked up the commute time, Kota confirmed. That's very rational. I learned it from someone. Something happened in Ryo's expression. The full arrival, finally, of the suppressed architecture that had been there for 11 weeks. Not the ghost of a smile. An actual one. Brief and real and entirely unmanaged. The first genuinely uncontrolled expression in 4 years of being careful. Kota, he said. Yes. I graduate tomorrow. I know. And after tomorrow, I'm 20 minutes away by train. I know, Kota said. I checked. He graduated on a Saturday in late November. Kota did not go to the ceremony. He was not invited. There was no reason for him to be there. First-year students did not attend fourth-year graduation ceremonies. He sat in studio room 3B at 6 p.m. Not because it was Tuesday or Thursday, because it was the room. He sat at his table with a sketch he was not drawing and looked at Ryo's table across from it. Cleared now. Nothing on it. The fourth year's work packed and gone. The space that had held Ryo's thesis for 16 weeks completely empty. At 6:24 the door opened. Ryo was still in his graduation clothes. Dark suit. The kind of formal he had never worn to a session. The collar of his shirt slightly loosened. He was carrying his notebook. He looked at Kota. Kota looked at him. You're not on time, Kota said. Sessions start at 6. I'm not here for a session, Ryo said. Why are you here? Ryo came into the room. Set his notebook on his old table, the empty one, the cleared one, and sat on the stool in front of it the way he had sat every Tuesday and Thursday for 16 weeks. Because this is where I've been coming twice a week for 4 months, he said. And it turns out habits are harder to change than plans. Your plan was to finish cleanly. My plan was wrong about what finishing meant. Kota looked at him across the 2 tables. So what does it mean? He said. It means, Ryo said, that I start at Aoyama on Monday. That it is 20 minutes from here by train. That I don't have a Tuesday and Thursday schedule anymore, but I have the rest of... He stopped. I have time. If you want it. A silence. I've wanted it since 8:47 on the first morning, Kota said. I just didn't have the name for it yet. Ryo looked at him for a long moment. What's the name for it? He said quietly. Kota looked back. I think you know what it is, he said. Yes, Ryo said. I think I do. Outside studio room 3B, the Sakura University corridor was quiet in the late November afternoon. The cherry blossom trees in the courtyard were bare and waiting for spring. The crescent moon carved into the building entranced stone caught the last of the evening light. Inside, 2 people sat at opposite tables that had held, between them, the most important 16 weeks of both their lives, and looked at each other, and did not look away. The train takes 20 minutes, Kota said finally. I know, Ryo said. That's close enough. Yes, Ryo said. It is. They say first love is supposed to be simple. I disagree. I think first love is the most complicated thing that exists, specifically because you have no previous experience to tell you what is happening. No map. No language. No category for the specific sensation of someone rearranging something in you without asking permission and then having the audacity to be 20 minutes away by train after the rearranging is done. He was my senior for exactly 87 days. He was careful and precise and controlled in all the ways that looked like confidence and were actually a very sophisticated form of protection that I did not understand until I watched it come down, slowly, session by session, library night by library night, over 16 weeks in a studio room with 2 drafting tables and a view of cherry blossom trees. He taught me that control can be a way of lying. He taught me this while demonstrating it, which I think was the most honest thing about him. I taught him, or tried to, that a variable you cannot calculate is not a problem. It is just something you have not been honest enough with yourself to name yet. We were both, in our different ways, learning to be honest for the first time. That is what first love is, I think. Not simple, not easy. Just the first time the thing you feel is larger than your ability to manage it. The first time staying careful costs more than it saves. The first time someone is 20 minutes away and that feels, against all rational calculation, like enough. He graduated on a Saturday. He was at the studio by 6:24. He is, as of this morning, 20 minutes away. I have not counted the minutes since then. I have counted other things. Better things. Things that do not have a deadline. Next story tease. Next time in the Moonlit Hearts Universe. A man walks into the Imperial Tokyo Hotel on a Tuesday night for a business dinner he did not want to attend. He sits at the bar. The bartender on the 23rd floor says, "The Crescent is our house cocktail. Dark blue. Something different." The man says, "I'll take it." He did not know, sitting at that bar, that he had just made the most significant decision of his evening, or that the person who made the cocktail had been watching him walk in the way you watch something you recognize before you understand why. Same city, different hearts. Next story. Tokyo after midnight. Call to action. If this story found you, if something in the 87 days, or the variable he could not calculate, or the 20 minutes by train landed somewhere true, like this video. Not for the algorithm, for the next person who needs to find it. Subscribe to stay in this universe. Every story lives in the same Tokyo, different hearts, the same city after midnight. And comment, have you ever felt something before you had the name for it? Before you even knew it was possible to feel that way about a person? Tell me which part found you. Until the next story finds us. Feel everything.